think we need to get theme music for this. We need our own house band. We need a house band for the forum. So, so welcome. Hopefully there's some folks watching online. We have a small group gathered here in the forum, and we have a couple of topics for you today. First, we want to start off by going back to the last forum that ran a little long, and we had a couple of questions from that. One from John Laverne asking about how the online college is going to impact Hancock. I don't see it impacting Hancock a whole lot. They can't really figure out what it is they're doing in that program. But I think to the extent it does impact us, it's really going to be on us, because we've got, we're becoming increasingly a younger and younger college every year. We showed that at All Staff Day in January. When you look at the number of concurrent enrollment students, the promise students, and students under the age of 24, it's almost 70% of our student body. And the number of adults we're educating is much smaller than it has been in the past year. So we really, probably in the next year, as we do our educational master plan, really need to take a focus on, how do we get back to adult learners? That leads also to a question from Marty Marino that was asking about what's the goal for community education. Not really a topic, like we can't do the whole strategic master planning for community ed, but community ed needs to play a really large role in whatever it is we're doing for our adult population, whether that's incumbent worker training or some of the fee-based programs that we're offering. So they're going to be a big player in our new truck driving program, for example. And John Laverne also asked about bachelor's degrees. If we would want to participate in that. There is zero conversation about this in Sacramento. Nobody's talking about allowing the community colleges to offer bachelor's degrees. It seems that the 15 colleges that have one seem to be pretty content. They were also some of the loudest colleges wanting that, and it's unfortunate because we have capacity here, and obviously we know we just got the numbers back from Cal Poly that once again we have the highest transfer rate to Cal Poly. How many years in a row? We're in 19 now, 18 years in a row. For the first time since 2000, Cuesta College, for example, is below 200 transfers, and our number of transfers to Cal Poly only twice in the last 13 years has it been lower than it is this year. So while our transfer rate is good, the number of students that Cal Poly is accepting has declined. And the Cuesta and Hancock used to run about 35% of transfers to Cal Poly. I think this year we're down to about 24% of those transfers. So we're seeing more and more colleges around the state sending students there, which just reduces the capacity for our own students. So I'll be looking for a letter from Jeff Armstrong. So with that, we have some good news. We do have some good news. We are just talked to Noemi. She is working on Promise stuff with all the other student services folks today, with priority registration going on. We've surpassed 1,250 students already eligible for Promise. So I mean that's tremendous. Last year we had 1,400 Promise students, like 1,403 or 1,430 total. We're already at 1,250 this year, and we've still got a long ways to go. So we're in good shape there. We're going to see that, which will also make our, make our campus younger again. So that's good. So we have two major topics today, and I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that a lot of us will be exiting early to go to Annette Chapman's funeral, and I'm sure a lot of folks will be flipping off early to do that as well. So. But we're gonna start with Eric Smith. He's gonna talk a little bit about our facility plans and let folks know what we're doing. So turn it over to Eric.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So when I was first asked to do this presentation, it was just limited to the fine arts, and I thought, well, I can't fill up 15 minutes just talking about the fine arts. So the title of the presentation is Fine Arts Complex and More! Exclamation mark added. I'm Eric Smith, the Associate Superintendent, Vice President for Finance and Administration, and Facilities is under my purview, so that's how I got this gig. I want to talk a little bit about the Fine Arts Complex, which is really kind of the crown jewel in our facilities program right now. The Fine Arts Complex is a 88,000 square foot building that includes both visual arts, multimedia, and applied design, photography, film and video, dance, music, and a recital hall. The estimated project cost, and that's total project cost, is $48 million. We have roughly $24,500,000 coming from the state to finance it. We just issued $23 million in general obligation bonds pursuant to Measure I, what we call Series E, which we just closed on May 7th. And we have up to $10,000 from the Patty Boyd Foundation. Hopefully we don't have to use that entire amount. But because cost escalation is an issue, and as you'll see in the timeline that I'll lay out, it's quite a while until we go to bid on this project. What the estimates are and whether they hold based on inflation, we won't know until the actual bid day. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline. We're submitting our working drawings to the Division of the State Architect on 5/28. And when I say Division of the State Architect, you'll often hear us say DSA. Well, DSA is our building authority equivalent. So if you built a house like in the city of Santa Maria or in the county of Santa Barbara, you'd have to go get a permit. DSA is our permitting authority. And DSA, even though it says Division of the State Architect, there's actually 3 components within DSA. The Division of the State Architect is made up mostly of structural engineers, and they look at the structural integrity of the plans and will do the calculations. But also included is fire and life safety, which is the state fire marshal that makes sure that our plans adhere to all state fire marshal codes, and also access compliance, which makes sure that we comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act with regard to access compliance. So we hope to have Division of the State Architect approval, including the other 2 units, by 12/5/19, which would allow us to go out to bid the 1st of 2020. So we'd probably be on the street for a couple of months, bidding the project through the competitive bid process, receive bids, hopefully a bid that's close to our estimate, which will allow us to proceed to board approval of the contract, which we estimate would be around April of 2020. The project itself could last up to 24 months. So you can see we will not be substantially complete until April of 2022. So we're roughly 3 years out. So you can see, just given the enormity of the project and the timeline, it's going to take a while to get this thing done. Okay, so what happened there? So before we can even think about doing this project, we have a number of utilities that lie in the footprint of where the building is going to be built. So one of the things I wanted to bring everybody up to speed is some of the things that will be happening on campus this summer, and this will be a big one, which will be visible. So several underground utilities line the footprint. These utilities include electrical, water, and when I say water, I mean fire suppression, irrigation, and domestic water, our comm system, and sanitary sewer. All that will have to be relocated out of the footprint because that's actually where the building's going to be built. So when you see trenching out there this summer, we're in the process of getting the quotes to do all this, and we'll probably do it on a multiple prime basis. We'll be trenching up that area, and so don't be alarmed. It's all kind of a precursor to the Fine Arts building. We also have something happening in Building N. We have a boiler replacement project that'll be scheduled to be completed. This just gives you an idea of how old Building N. The original boiler was actually installed in 1967. It was an Ajax boiler, originally installed in 67. It's on the verge of failure. Well, why is that important? Well, part of the problem is the boiler doesn't comply with air pollution control standards, but the bigger issue is it actually supplies the heating for the men's showers and locker room, the training room, the equipment manager's area, the clothes washer, restrooms, team room, and the department offices. So if it totally shuts down, we have no heat in any of those areas. And they won't have heat for, I think, 75 days is actually the duration of the contract. So we hope to have a bid ready to take to the board in June on this project and be well underway and having it completed over the 75 days over the summer. So the estimated cost to replace the boiler is around $600,000. We've actually allocated money in the budget to do this. It's a combination of capital outlay funds and scheduled maintenance funds we receive from the state. And we're ready to go. Another thing that we're working on is what's kind of it's been termed the lock project. And one of the issues we have, or challenges we have on campus, are all these things: security management. We have got break-ins, burglaries, theft to open classrooms. We have a key system that's easily duplicated, so there's no key control. We have doors left unlocked, allowing unauthorized entry, and we have a lack of lockdown capability. So we have a multi-pronged security management solution, which is being implemented over phases. And the first one is changing out our locking hardware to allow for internal lockdown without leaving the room. So that will increase our security. We're going to change our key system and key tracking control so they're not easily duplicated. We're going to have an installation of a master lockdown button at Campus PD and independent lockdown buttons for multiple buildings. And I have those buildings. Hold on, I wrote them down here. I might have to put on my glasses. A, B, S, S2, O100, 200, 300, library, and the ARC. So all of those will have independent lockdown capability once this is completed. And I think the best part is the fact that we have the master at PD. So this is something we're working on as well. The estimated cost is about $344,000. It's already been budgeted. So those are things that are all happening over the summer. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions with regard to any of those. Any questions? Lauren has a question.
I was just curious, so for those individual buildings that have the lockdown capability, who is in charge of being able to lock them down in the buildings? Someone in the buildings themselves? Or?
We will designate somebody in the building and what office they go in. So obviously they'll be in the president's office in our building.
Yeah.
We need somebody competent.
Carmen.
So those are some of the things we're working on over the summer. I mean, there's other miscellaneous smaller things, but I just didn't want people to wander across campus and what's going on here. So this kind of gives you a kind of a brief overview of the activity that'll be happening over the summer, as well as what our timeline is with regard to fine arts. Obviously, we have a lot of other projects that are probably farther out on the planning horizon, but since these are immediate or something, there's activity happening right now, I wanted to bring everybody up to speed.
So remind me again, where exactly is Fine Arts going? It's the dirt?
It's the grass right over there.
Oh, it's the grass,
But
okay.
it'll extend into the parking lot, I
Right.
guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will we have like signage around the construction area so people will know kind of what's going on?
Yeah. As far as the like a building project sign, yeah, we'll have that. Usually, a lot of times, public agencies that you receive money from the state, they'll require that as part of the project. Because they want publicity out of it, of course. Any other questions? Okay, I think
Thank you.
Kathy's up.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. If you haven't met me before, I am your campus police chief. Joined the campus back in November. Thank you, Kevin. Had a good time. And I thought all the reason I was brought on is for all my good and great police officer skills and management skills. But I very quickly learned that there was a strong interest at every level on campus for education and for knowledge in regards to emergency planning. So that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. Back in July 2018, Kevin's team worked and contracted with a group called Waco. And very specifically, those folks are Michael Messina and Tom Way, who both have a long history, both with this campus in teaching, Michael does, as well as in the fire industry, and in responding to calls and operation plans. And what they did is they began a multifaceted process of evaluating how ready Allen Hancock was for any type of emergency. Then in November 2018, I came on board, and basically what I stepped into was working with both of them in managing and evaluating what the scope of the work was that we were going to try to accomplish in this next year from July 2018 to May 2019. Literally I came on November 5th, and by the next week I was participating in an active shooter exercise, tabletop exercise. Again, luckily from the background that I've had and experience in law enforcement, these were the types of tabletop exercises that I very easily, operationally, was able to go into. But more encompassing, working with each of the different sections, whether it's logistics or finance, that was new for me, and really working with these teams and evaluating who these teams were. Some of the work that they did initially before I got here was really go from department to department, looking for old emergency operation plans, looking for brochures. It was amazing the amount of paperwork that were given to them. And so what was kind of funny in the end when they finally pulled together basically the operation plan for the campus by March 2019, everything that's on that table up in the corner in that photo was what we had on campus at their plan. We now have a very easy and simple plan to work off of. That plan was completed and reviewed by March 2018, and then we did a functional exercise on hazmat. We actually used that as a template to help us. That plan is ready for release and implementation, and the goal is to be able to start getting that up on our website, as well as just talk about it today. Some of the first scope of the work that I worked with them on was, again, having done an active shooter presentation and how we had things set up in the EOC, so that's Emergency Operations Center, was really being able to pull together the tables and the sections so that we can communicate and talk. So some of the first things that I noticed is we were really working off the normal boardroom long tables, and it's hard for folks to work that way from the end. Collaborative effort from facilities, Jim Harvey's team, Bridget and him, and from IT, Jake Zent and Brendan Robertson. They literally came in, Brenda did, and with a large ladder stood up and took photographs. I mean, that's how deep we got into making sure that we had knowledge and stuff that we could have that would be sustainable. So we updated our EOC layout. We identified what our communication resources were in radios, in phones, in satellite phones, in computers and media equipment. We also evaluated what our ancillary equipment resources were. And they really worked hard on the boxes that actually each of these different sections had, whether it's the vests or the materials that were within it. And we created a storage area, or they created a storage area, thank you, Carmen, and a mobile ability to be able to move those things, because we had a lot of boxes that was very difficult to move very quickly. Working with, again, our logistics team, which is primarily facilities, we started looking on the campus and evaluating what our campus resources were in the event of an emergency. We also were assessing, in the event that our EOC was a subject of the emergency, where else on campus could we move to? And there were a lot of challenges, as we know with some of the older buildings, when it comes to being able to have IT access or phone access. But we have found a couple of different places that we could move to quickly if we needed to. We have inventoried equipment and tools. I mean, that's everywhere from where do we have places of shovels? If we needed to dig something, or we needed to break into a door, where do we have the types of equipment for that? Again, what kind of radio phone systems do we have so that we were interoperable on the campus, and also interoperable in our communications with our mutual aid resources, Santa Maria PD, Santa Maria Fire, and Lompoc. We looked at and evaluated, Jim's crew did, what our transportation resources are. So if we had to get somewhere quick and we had to move a certain amount of people, You know, we do have folks on campus where it's gonna be the child care center or other folks with ADA needs that we need to be able to get to and be able to move them if we needed to evacuate. Medical and water supplies are some of the other things that we evaluated. Some new first aid kits and updates on the first aid kits occurred at both the PD level, because we're some of the first responders out there, as well as the facilities level. So folks out there that are doing grounds and folks that are doing custodians, we have greater access to kits, medical kits that would help us. AED mapping was updated by Jim's crew, as well as the map for the evacuation plan. So we had something very, very simple and we just needed folks out of the building. Those evac maps were also updated. And then last but not least, and this is also working with Eric's team with finance, is identifying community supplies for resources that we don't have, and contracts, and working on those types of contracts. Campus emergency communications. One of the things I found was if something's happening, everybody's calling the police department. And some of those things are like right on, and other times our dispatchers need to be totally open and free to be able to make those calls to San Maria PD and bring in and help us bring in the resources. So in working with Lauren's team at our public affairs office, we identified a secondary level of redundancy. Lauren and I were already working on what do things look like with Rave? How do we use the blue phones for communication? How do we use our PA systems? So we did some initial training with their group, and we're going to continue doing that and building out that redundancy so that, again, if we had an emergency that required our dispatchers to be tied up, we have other folks that I can communicate that can get the message out to campus. Additional things that recently have happened was evaluating our emergency blue phones, and we found that there were several that were dated and needed to be updated, so IT has been working on that for us. As well as starting to do additional regular testing. So I'd like to see, and we'd like to push out quarterly testing of our Rave and alert system, again, just as a test. IT is already doing the emergency phone system testing on a regular basis. What's one of the first things that all of us right now can connect with when it comes to emergency planning and being aware? And that is our Hancock Rave alert system. If you're not already on it, I would really encourage you to go on it. It's on the Hancock website, and get yourself connected. If you have any questions, then you certainly can ask IT, or as well as Lauren's group or my group. Mutual aid liaison relationships are other things that we've been working on and building. So we had those, but we hadn't been as connected recently. Meeting with Lompoc PD captains, as well as we've been starting to do more and more training with Santa Maria City Police. We've utilized the county fire and other of the resources when we did some of our training exercises. So they were actually there as subject matter experts, not only for active shooter training, but more recently at a hazmat exercise that we did. And then UC Santa Barbara was another great resource that both Mike and Tom had connected with while I was still over there apparently, and did a walkthrough and really learned about what UCSB is doing. They're one of the California campuses that really have a high-end and forward-thinking program. So they're one of the campuses that we're looking at modeling. And we're really looking at ourselves as a community college being the model for other community colleges. Some of the preparatory training we did included observer participant training with Santa Maria PD at a training exercise, an active shooter training exercise. It also included participating with FEMA at a Santa Maria Regional Airport training. Again, some of the most updated training when it comes to responding to active shooter. We did a lot of meeting and facilitating with UCSB Emergency Operations Center, which included our department being invited to a FEMA pilot program training back in January at UCSB. We also invited our partner, Cuesta College Chief. And we had an opportunity, it was a full day, which included staff members on campus, identified staff members, and we had a live active shooter training pilot program. It's gonna roll out, and we're hoping also to be one of those folks that might be the recipient of this free training at a future date. And of course, we've been meeting with our other campus emergency planning stakeholders, and that includes planning, that includes finance, our public information officer, our executive policy level folks, and logistics. So what are some of the things that have occurred? September 2018, Tom and Mike worked and did a 3-hour ELC baseline training just to get and gear up for what then was my first training here on campus in November 2018 active shooter drill. Well, again, we did the FEMA pilot program training at UCSB in January. The staff at the police department have all done the Stop the Bleed training. So we're not only all certified, we're also carrying tourniquets, which is another direction that nationally, statewide, as well as this campus, we're looking at going toward, along with what we have with our AEDs. And we've done section training. So I pulled everybody together, sometimes more than once, and then in different groups, as you see here. And then last but not least, is all kind of pulled together at another hazmat functional exercise drill. And that was one very intense drill, I think, for a lot of the folks that are sitting in this room. It really pulled us together in talking, communicating, identifying areas that we need to improve on, and also identifying how connected we were, and really the information that we already had and knew. So what's next? Of course, continuing to work with Waco is a goal of mine. We will be providing annual reviews of campus emergency plans, policies, procedures, and programs, and that's not only about emergency preparedness, but it's going to be about other areas on campus that I think we can be a resource for. We're going to collaborate with our institutional grants office. There are a lot of grants out there. Matter of fact, this morning I got an email that there's one that's coming up that's pretty sizable, but we got a quick deadline on it, so I'm hoping to get back to the office and start working on that grant proposal. Continue working again with our other public safety partners, and especially at our own public safety complex over at Lompoc. We have great basis of knowledge when it comes to emergency and medical service responses, fire safety with instructors, and what we'd really like to look at in the future, and we've been connecting with them over there, is to bring a staff level CERT training here. We want to expand our program at Lompoc Valley campus. So again, another space that we have not been over and created an exercise for that space specifically, and working also with Lompoc PD and Fire. And like to develop a life safety rep program. And so really when I'm looking at that, I'm looking at each of the different departments and identifying folks that are interested, that want to be trained, and that will be responsible for the, if we had something as simple as a fire drill, putting on vests, and then ushering folks to where our evac points are for each building, practicing those types of drills. And a lot of also of what we're trying to do is build up sustainability. So with everything that we've done with our section and finance and logistics team, it's not just that director that's at that table. That director's been looking out at who's their seconds and who's their thirds. So if I was suddenly on vacation, my second Sergeant Ken Reed has been laid up, and he's as easily able to respond and do what we all expect as I am. Goal next year again is to present two more ELC exercises, and those ELC exercises we really want relevant to our area. So if things that we're experiencing in this area or that our community colleges are experiencing, we want them to be relevant, not something that, you know, an airport drill when we don't have an airport on campus, for example. We have already started doing some inspections of campus building. PCPA was one of those recently, and we're going to be identifying and expanding out to other campus buildings when it comes to fire and life safety planning. And then we also want to expand our individual department workspace assessments. So in follow-up to the November active shooter training, we developed our first initial active shooter presentation. And from some of the folks that were there, we have been trialing this active shooter presentation. And as a part of that, we're also going into individual departments and spaces and assessing the work spaces in the event that we didn't need to barricade in place or we needed to evacuate. So we've only done a couple of those, but we do plan on expanding that. We also, again, want to expand our active shooter presentation with current information that comes out and training. And last but not least, I also really want to get involved when it comes to campus special event planning. And an example of that is after this presentation, I'll be meeting with a team, and we're looking at commencement different. So when it comes to a response, any kind of emergency response, if we had something like that, happen at one of our events, especially a significant one like commencement, we're gonna be more prepared. Any questions?
Kathy, what was that Stop the Bleed workshop? What did that entail?
So Stop the Bleed workshop entails, basically it's a tourniquet form of training. And so years and years ago, it was believed that if you put a tourniquet on for X amount of hours, it actually put a victim at greater risk. It's now been determined with training and with experience and research that that's not the case. So these tourniquets are being put out more frequently in different work types of environments in the event that we ended up having some type of injury. And sometimes those injuries are going to be industrial ones. And if we look at what the equipment stuff that we have out there with facilities, there may be a great need that we need to respond to something and somebody has a major bleed cut and we need to tourniquet it off at a higher point in order to as we wait for a medical response to come in. So again, Hancock PD's group has trained in that area. We are carrying the tourniquets. The next group that's training is Jim Harvey's group. Questions?
How long is that training?
It was it's anywhere from a 2 to 4 hour training. So part of that is the practice piece. So you get to practice on yourself with the equipment, and then you also get to practice on different individuals. So when the interest is to keep practicing and trying different points of tourniqueting, then sometimes it'll take a little bit longer.
I was wondering if you could maybe explain what our responsibility is as college employees. I don't know if it's something Dr. Walters wants to explain, but some people may not know that if there's an emergency, we just don't all run home.
Go ahead.
So if there is an emergency, we don't want everyone to run home. Well, depending on what the emergency is, I think in most cases, we're gonna want folks to respond to our direction and what, again, as we build out our department safety reps' direction on where we want them evacuated to. A lot of confusion can occur if everybody's trying to run to their cars, and now, depending on what the incident is, we now have trapped folks in cars. If everyone's trying to run to a certain direction. So we are usually gonna have the strongest knowledge base on whatever the incident is. Again, we're gonna be putting that out and communicating that through Rave and other forums, like the Blue Phones have speakers on them, so we're able to put that out and direct folks to where they need to go. Another method is that we use our speakers that we have in the cars. But our campus staff and faculty are all resources. And a lot of our focus, again, in our direction, our focus and our mission is to make sure that our students are safe, that our guests are safe. So in building up all of our expertise and our knowledge and our comfort levels too, we're gonna be able to be, all of us, a better resource for the campus when it comes to emergency planning or any kind of emergency response. Yes?
Have the evacuation points for each building, are those already established or is that in process?
They have been established. We haven't quite rolled out a full campus-wide. If you look over the corner there, I don't know that the camera can scan over there, but you see a flip chart for emergency planning. This is being updated right now. And part of what we've been doing is, as we go do some of the active shooter training and do the building assessments or space assessments, we've been putting some of those out within those departments. But that's gonna be one of the points. We're looking at the last page. It's actually blank, and putting that evac map on that. I see that as a tool. This flip chart is literally, if you're a department safety rep, we don't have those right now, but you feel responsible within your office, grab that chart, get out of the building, direct other people out of the building, and use it, because it may say something like it has earthquake drill, fire drill, power outage, quick flip chart, and it gives you some directions that are specific to this campus. If there's no more questions, thank you.
Alright. Did you find any other questions, Carmen?
No, no one else.
Oh, good. So, then, any questions here, general questions from the audience? No? Alright. Well, we'll thank everybody for setting this up, and we'll go on about our day. So thank you everybody for coming, and thanks for watching online.